It's a market that not that many people follow, and I think that's a mistake. It's just about to have its first negative year in 6 years. But I think this sets Palladium up for a really interesting 2022. In this video, I'll talk about why it's been hit so hard, but also look at where the opportunity could be for catching a big recovery next year. Hello, I'm David Jones from Capital.com, and I thought we'd do an outlook for Palladium into 2022. It's been a really interesting year for Palladium. It's been a great market over the years in terms of big trends. This year has been no exception in the last few months, although the trend has been the other way to what we've been used to in Palladium over the years. So I thought, well, let's do an update. Let's take a look at it in a bit more detail, see why it's been so bad and what the next year could look like. So as usual in this video, I'll talk about why it's had such a bad year, the levels to watch, what analysts think about for next year for Palladium. Then we'll jump onto the charts and take a look and see what the opportunity could be. Because I think there will be an opportunity in 2022. We perhaps just have to be a little bit patient, but more about that in a second. As usual, if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, if you could click on subscribe, it does help support the channel. It means we can continue to push out lots of different content on the various markets we cover throughout the week. Right, let's get into it and take a look at Palladium in a bit more detail. So let's go through some of the Palladium basics, first of all. It's one of its biggest uses, its major use is in the auto industry. It's used in catalytic converters that sit on the exhaust pipe, turning some of the pollutants that are produced by engines into less harmful components. So that's a big part of Palladium's use. It's also used in other industries, nowhere near the same extent, but in the likes of dentistry, electronics, and jewelry. So it does have a few real uses out there in the wider world. But it's the car industry that's been the problem. There's been a lack of demand for Palladium this year. If you follow what's going on in the business world and the economy, you know there has been a massive chip shortage around the world. We know these days how much technology goes into modern cars. So all the major manufacturers have had to rein back production of their cars because they can't get the chips. So if fewer cars are being made, there's fewer catalytic converters getting bolted onto them. So clearly that's seen a massive drop-off in demand for Palladium. That's been a major reason why we've seen the price hit so hard. So for the year to date, I mean, it's quite a staggering performance. It did actually hit all-time highs, I think, earlier this year. We'll see it on the chart in a second. But for the year to date, at the time of recording, the price of Palladium is down by around 33% from where it ended 2020. So it's been a pretty vicious sell-off. And as I said at the beginning, the previous 6 years have all seen gains for Palladium, the price of Palladium. So this is the first time we've seen a losing year in 6 years. So much of the fortunes for Palladium next year hinge on this chip shortage and the car industry getting back to normal. So some do think that demand will clearly pick up next year. Some are saying that perhaps the middle of the year we see the auto industry get back to normal levels of production and perhaps a really big boost, a ramp up in production in the second half of 2022. So clearly it's going to be really interesting to watch how the price of Palladium reacts to developments in the car industry. But of course, longer term, there is the issue of internal combustion engines getting phased out in various parts of the world. What does this mean for Palladium? Some analysts are saying that actually longer term it points to a fairly bleak future for Palladium. But for now, let's just focus on 2022. So when it comes to analyst forecasts, they're bullish compared to where it's trading now. Bank of America are forecasting around $2,000 for Palladium next year. JP Morgan, even more bullish. I think they're expecting $2,200 for Palladium in the first half of next year, which is a pretty punchy forecast compared to where it's trading now. And I think the interesting trade here in Palladium is to watch to see if we do see the price start to turn, with it almost acting as a leading indicator for what's going on in the car industry when hopefully this chip shortage starts to get resolved. It's been a great market to trade in the past because of the trend. So I wonder if it does start to turn, will we end up seeing a really strong recovery for Palladium if it starts to turn? Let's take a look at the charts in a second. But first of all, let's talk about the big levels to watch. The really big level from 2021 is that high, the all-time high hit, just a fraction above $3,000. Various levels on the way down after that. The most immediate one for me is around $2,200, the November high. On the downside, lots of big levels coming up. $1,500 psychological level. After that, the really big level, 2020 lows coming in at $1,370. But as usual, to put some color on these numbers and see what the opportunity might be, let's take a look at the charts. I thought we'd start things off with a really long-term view for Palladium. So this is the chart going back 20 plus years. And you can see it's really from, well, I suppose if we said from 2016, it really started moving and rallying out to those highs we hit this year. So it eventually in 2018 took out the old high from back in the year 2000. And then we saw this massive run up, lots of volatility over March 2020, of course, as the coronavirus pandemic spread, and then traded up briefly through $3,000 this year. So some great trends over the years, but you can see the size of the decline this year. So let's flip things over to a daily chart. If we pick up on the trend from 2008, so this is still a 13-year trend. I think it's really interesting where Palladium has traded down to recently, because that trend line is still just about intact. And this is one of the reasons why I think it will be an interesting year, 2022 for Palladium. Particularly because all of the problems this year, mainly down to what's been going on with in the car industry. So at the moment, it's still pretty weak. It was only yesterday, I think, at the time of recording, we saw it move to a new low for the year. But this whole zone down here from, if we pick up on the 2019 lows, down around $1,250. Then we've got these 2020 lows coming in around 1,370. We've seen Palladium move back to 18-month plus lows where it's trading now. So for me, from a trend following point of view, if you take a look at the RSI down here, clearly it's gone pretty oversold in November with the price getting hit so hard. And we actually have something I mentioned when we spot it in other markets, this idea of bullish divergence, where the price hits a low and then trades lower still. But the RSI, you can see, is making higher lows. So it can be a suggestion that perhaps the sell-off has gone too far. So as the year ends for Palladium, I think that's quite an interesting setup going into 2022. But for now, for me, it's still too weak, but it's really an interesting market to watch because of that bigger trend, and we're near these old lows. So put bluntly, if the price of Palladium is going to turn around anywhere, I'd be expecting this 1400 zone, the summer 2019 lows, the March 2020 lows, and pretty much the trend line as well, to be a really important one. So I think for me, that trend is still down. We could pick up on a trend line off those highs. But presumably this chip shortage is going to get sorted out during 2022. Palladium is not going to hang around and wait for the chip shortage to be sorted out. We're probably going to see the price start to tick up as the news filters through and as production gets back to normal. So that's why I think it's a really interesting market to watch in 2022. I think if we start to lose, these old lows around the 1400 mark for Palladium, the risk is we're going back to test the 2019 lows down around 1,270. So, it's been hit really hard from those all-time highs this year. The price has almost halved from where it was in May. So I don't want to stand in front of a runaway train and be a buyer here, but it's definitely one to closely watch next year to see if these old levels prop the price up and its fortunes turn round. And perhaps we have the same sort of uptrends we've had in Palladium over the last 6 years. That's it for this update in Palladium. A really interesting market to watch next year. I think it's not one that many retail investors watch, I think, historically, but you can see the sort of trends we get. Well worth keeping an eye on. We'll come back to it if things start to turn next year. But for now, from me, David Jones and Capital.com, we'll leave things there. Good luck with your trading.
For more trading videos just like this, please subscribe to our channel.